Hello and welcome to Brave Talks. I'm Aidan and I will be your host for this episode. By now, we all know the benefits of remote working. No soul-crushing commute, no managers or co-workers hanging over your shoulder, no one stealing your lunch from the office fridge. For some, it is a choice, for others a lifeline. To discuss this topic, I'm joined today by Paul Hounslow. So grab a cup of tea or your favourite beverage. This is Brave Talks. Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to Brave Talks. Today, I'm joined by Paul Hounslow, and it's my absolute pleasure to have this conversation today because I think it's a really interesting and topical area. And Paul, we always start this way, and it's a difficult question. I always think it's difficult. Some people find it very easy to answer. But if you could introduce yourself, who is Paul?
Okay, it's a good question. I'll let you know when I find out. But I'm a former soldier, retired firefighter, and I've been working in software development, first as a hobbyist, then as professionally for about 40 years. So I have ADHD, I have severe anxiety, and since my second COVID inoculation, I have interstitial lung disease. This means that I'm taking a huge amount of immunosuppressants just to be able to breathe. Thankfully, I work in an area where I can work from home, and I'm still locked down. My wife also has lung conditions, so the both of us are pretty much still in lockdown.
So, I mean, thank you for sharing that. So,
Yeah.
how long have you been impacted by this, and how has it affected your kind of day-to-day?
We got sent home March 2020, was it? And been pretty much isolating ever since. People very rarely are able to come into the house. We've had the odd engineer come in and make sure they're masked and take precautions, and other than that. But if I want to socialise, have friends, it's done in the garden or out on one of my walks.
So there's been a recent study, and in that study, it showed that 50% of workers really prefer the kind of remote working opportunity, but they do have a kind of an impact for poorer collaboration, getting distracted by different things, and sometimes working longer hours because obviously you've got the kind of access to things, you can just keep working a bit longer. Um, how do you think this has affected people? And what would you say was the biggest kind of impact for you?
The biggest impact for me is the loneliness. As a former soldier and retired firefighter, I've worked in teams that are very tight-knit, where you're depending upon your colleagues for your life. And I'm an extremely social person. So the enforced isolation I find extremely difficult. My happy place is a coffee shop with a book because I'm surrounded by people, but I'm not having to interact. And I just can't do that anymore. So for me, the entirety of my social life is now online. And the majority of that is through work. My role as a Scrum Master is very social. It's about making sure that the team can achieve the goals and maintaining the team. And for me, that's extremely important, especially as that's most of the social contact I get.
And one of the real challenges is that kind of connection and communication. So, what do you do to try and maintain that? What tricks have you had?
Well, one of the things is that if I were in the office, we would be just having general chit chat, talk about things that people find interesting, getting to know each other, whether that's actually in the office itself or at lunch, down the pub, that sort of thing, and where you get to know your team, your colleagues, and you find out more about them. You can take an interest in them, and then they can feel valued because you're taking an interest. And I find people interesting. I mean, so that to me is a huge, an important part of my role. Remotely, I have to ensure that I do the same. I have to ensure that people feel that they're valued, feel that they're understood. and that I really do value the people I work with, do understand them, do get some idea of a little bit of insight into their interests and the things that make them tick. Partly because, as I say, I'm a nosy person. I like to know these things, and partly because unless you have that, you cannot be the sort of the oil that eases the friction of a team that working together.
And I suppose part of this, I mean, in that time period, since we certainly, were working remotely, a lot of new people joined the team, and obviously you didn't get to meet them in the office and build that rapport and that relationship. How did you kind of overcome that, or in fact, did you overcome that? What was your approach?
But for a lot of people, I haven't because I haven't worked with them. Because I've worked with people in the office, even if I'm not working with people, we'll meet at the coffee machine, just pass the day, say hello, and be involved in conversations around work and not always around work, whether I'm working with them or not. But now the only interaction I really get with my colleagues is when I'm working with them. And that might just be for, say, 15 minutes every other day in a meeting. So I and the company has grown hugely since lockdown. So there are a lot of people that I have never really spoken to.
And I think it's interesting because a lot of people make comments about, we all need to return to the office and we want to get back into the space and get back to normal, that kind of
Whatever that is.
whatever that is exactly. But in your situation, it's not something you can actually do. You can't physically return to this. So this is a true option for you, and it's something that's kind of helpful. Is there anything that organizations could do to kind of mitigate that, getting to know these people that you don't necessarily work with? I'm just curious.
Well, we've done some marvelous things. The summer party was fantastic. It was held outside. I was able to attend and um, meet people, both people that I have worked with and had not met face to face, and also meet other people that I hadn't worked with. But it's difficult because well, I'm not sure it's necessary to get to know everybody in the company. I wouldn't anyway. And we'll soon get to know each other if we work together.
Yeah.
But the major problem in our industry, and it's happened to me, who's working separate from the company. And then there is no interaction with colleagues within the company. And that's a harder thing. And we've been very good about this. I have um, a with my boss, Smith. He comes and joins me on my morning walk. I make sure that there are check-ins with my line manager, with other colleagues who are interested in maintaining that form of contact, so we don't all go stir crazy. Whether that's a short video call or just a few lines on a messaging system.
Do you think that's really important to have that kind of shared common view of that communication, that we have the same values to say, well, actually, it's very important to maintain those relationships?
It's very important. It's very important. As a Scrum Master, one of my roles is to make sure that the team is focused on the goal. It's very easy particularly for developers, to go spinning off doing what they think is wanted, and it's not necessarily towards the goal, and they need to be sort of cat herded back in towards the main goal. And to make sure that the team is bound together and working clearly and feeling everybody in the team is feeling appreciated and valued, it's good to have a clear goal to work towards, and we need to ensure that that's maintained while people are working remotely, especially. It's slightly harder, but it's not impossible. We have to work at it, like everything else that's worthwhile. Take the time to ensure that people feel valued, people understand what's required of them, and are given clear goals.
I mean, you mentioned about it's an isolating or kind of lonely impact of having to work remotely. Um, what do you think organizations can do collectively to kind of improve upon that, or are they doing things to improve upon that?
I think they are. I think having buddy systems. I was asked at a company I worked years ago. They did one of these polls to the workforce, and one of the questions they asked, which seemed a bit strange at the time, was, "Do you have a friend at work?" And that didn't mean friend as in you would expect outside of work, but it means, is there somebody at work you can talk to, you can chat to, who can assist you with problems inside and outside work that you're having, just to be able to make your life better. And I think that's a really good system, to be able to say, everybody has someone they can at least talk to once a week, preferably, once a day or every other day, just to make sure that they're okay, things are going along, that sort of thing.
I remember during lockdown, you started a technique of I think it was a Discord or something similar. It was a
That wasn't me, but yes, it was a good thing having the Discord live chat.
and that was the principle of basically I think it was like a coffee cooler type approach,
Yeah.
wasn't it? That you had if you just wanted to chat in the background, it was always open, and I think you sat there in the background, you had it there to know people were in that space.
But that's it, because it's no good if someone goes there needing to talk and there's no one there. And I'm always happy to talk. It's a large part of my job as a Scrum Master. Really, it's just talking to people and making sure they're okay and getting things going. So yeah, that was a very good thing. It became less dropped off now, but um, there are tools, just impromptu chats, reaching out, messaging people. Are you okay? You know, so just staying in touch. Don't If you're feeling isolated, chances are someone else is as well.
Mhm.
Someone's got to reach out.
I mean, I'm just curious because that having just thought of that kind of almost digital space, I don't want to call it metaverse because obviously that's
Yeah.
been thrown about a lot. But I mean, do you think some of the newer technologies that people are talking about, this more integrated augmented reality type of thing, could help with that isolation challenge? Because obviously you could potentially have people in your space digitally um, that might be, I don't know if that's interesting or scary. I'm curious. I mean, do you think it could be an innovative space?
I think it's very interesting. One of the things I do, because I can't go out, is I do a lot of online gaming, and that's um, we use Discord to chat and stuff, and that's um, um, you probably wouldn't want to be doing that in VR as well. Bit boring, because old men sitting around, sitting around. But just having the open chat, I think, yeah, it's useful. But the doing remote working with teams for 15 years now,
Mm.
and the way that the tools to do that have improved has been a huge thing, with all the tools that we have now, where we can be on and just reach out and type a few words and then switch straight to a conversation, and get to see someone, which I think is kind of important, even if it is just another face on the screen.
I just want to touch upon one area again, which is just having a conversation with someone. We all have conversations and meetings like this where there's other participants and we're talking about work, but just having a chat, just having a not necessarily an important topic, just a conversation, as you would in the office. How important is that to you? I mean, is this something we should be more mindful of as organizations and as people individually?
Hugely important. That she knows when I've had a chat like this, because my mood is so much better, so much more lifted. She can tell when when I've had a day where I haven't really had a chance to speak to someone, because I'm quite miserable. And when I've had a chat, then I'm bouncing around the house, all happy. But it's also important for work. We work better when we are happier, but also there's lots of levels to communication that might not at first be perceived as directly work related. There's making sure you understand the needs of your teammates and being able to form those levels of communication that you need when you do need to talk about work. There is the fact that an awful lot of work, particularly in the development area, it's a myth about development being people sat at the computers, head down, typing away. 90% of it is communication, because unless you know what you're supposed to be doing, you can't do it.
Yeah.
One of my proudest moments as an agile coach was in an organization with 2 offices, and we had a maintenance of one, I've forgotten the word, one culture. And the boss came in one day and said, "It's like a gentleman's club in here," because there was bustle and communication, not people sat down with the headphones on.
Yeah.
You know, and that was a hugely proud moment for me, because it meant that I'd done my job.
Yeah.
You know, people were working, communication was happening. And I think that is important. And of course, there's what IBM termed the water cooler effect.
Yeah.
Which I've seen so many times in my career have immense effect, where people are just randomly talking and someone completely outside of the problem can give a solution that other people inside the problem have been banging their head against the wall for a while.
Absolutely.
So it is important to have and maintain areas of communication, lines of communication. It's such an important thing for morale, but for work as well.
Yes. And of course, mental health as well. I mean,
Yes.
and it's a huge topic which we've talked many times about. And what advice would you give to someone that might be struggling with this particular, remote working, isolation, those sort of things? What would you suggest to them?
Well, what I found works for me is, if you're at work, be at work. So I get dressed as if I would to be in the office. And I even got a colleague to take a photograph of the office to put behind me in the video calls, because it tickles me. But try and have a work routine. You are at work in the office. Just because your office is, and I'm lucky enough to be able to have a space that can be an office, just because your office isn't actually in the same building as your colleagues, it's still, you mean, I'm still at work. I'm still in the office, even if it's virtually. And so structure for that is that I start work at the same time every day where possible. I have lunch at the same time. I've booked out my lunch hour so that I maintain this structure. I finish at the same time, again, where possible, every day. And when I finish, I go for a walk to get away from the office and back into home. Things from home will interrupt, they do, and that's okay, because things at work will interrupt that are not necessarily related to what you're doing, but your focus is still in the back of your mind, allowing the thought process to continue on what you're doing at work. And then when you're at home, that still happens, because it would happen even if I was in the office. But when I'm home, I try and be at home. And as I said many times, I'm very, very nosy, but I do have to curb an awful lot of that and resist the temptation to, oh, there's an email coming from work. No, because in fact, I probably do that less now I'm working from home than I would when I was in the office.
Yeah. No, that's really fantastic, and I think that routine and that separation is really important, and I think it's a brilliant way to support someone.
It helps, because if I was commuting to work, I'd either be on my motorcycle or my bicycle, and there would be a ramp up to being at work and then a cool down afterwards.
Yeah.
And when you just, moving from one room to another, that's difficult to do. Plus, you don't leave the house.
Yeah.
So get out of the house, go outside, go for a walk. I go for a walk in the morning and I go for a walk in the evening. And it's good for my mental health. It's good for my health. And just being outside, because being outside is not something I normally do anymore.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
You know,
Well, thank you so much, Paul. I really appreciate it. It's been fantastic to talk to you, and it's a topic that we could talk on and on and on about because it's so important to the modern world now. I mean, this is part of the DNA of what we do.
it
Um,
is. And as you know, I can go on anyway. And on and on.
as can I, as can I. Well, thank you so much, Paul, and thank you for joining us today at Break Talks. And I look forward to seeing you in future episodes.